Welcome to the Veterans in Politics Talk Show. Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.
Welcome to the Joint Veterans Endorsement Interviews for non-judicial candidates. At the outset, we would like to formally recognize and thank our sponsoring organizations for making today's event possible. Sponsors are Judge Mary Perry, Clark County District Family Court Division, Department P, Christine Brewer, Clark County District Court Family Division, Department S, Veterans in Politics International, VIPI, Nevada Veterans Association. We also extend our sincere appreciation to our additional sponsors and community partners whose support helps ensure a professional, fair, and transparent endorsement process. We are honored to have you with us today. Before we begin the interviews, let's review the rules and format. First, panel members will introduce ourselves by stating our names and the organizations we represent. Next, you as a candidate will introduce yourself. Please include the office you're running for and explain why you're seeking that position. We will then proceed to the interview portion. Please remember this is an interview, not a debate. Candidates may not ask questions of one another, but you can ask one of yourself. All responses must be directed to the panel. In the interest of fairness to all participants, time limits will be strictly enforced. Each candidate will usually have 1 minute and 30 seconds. We're going to give you 3 for each question. When you have 30 seconds remaining, you'll be shown a yellow card. When your time has expired, you'll be shown a blue card. You may finish your sentence, but you will then be asked to conclude. After all panel members have completed our questions, you as the candidate will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. You'll have 2 or 3. At the conclusion of today's interviews, we will once again recognize and thank all of our sponsors. Let's begin. Thank you. I'm Cindy Lake with Veterans in Politics International. Let's go this way.
Sue Christensen, Veterans in Politics International.
Rayanne Tobin, Nevada Veterans Association.
Rich Santamaro, Nevada Veterans Association.
John Franks with Veterans in Politics, also Las Vegas born, 1966. Go Rebels.
Sue Christensen, Veterans in Politics International. Do you support expanding armed personnel beyond sworn campus police, and what specific policies would you implement to improve campus safety?
Use this mic?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you restate that again? You threw me because I thought I was going to do it in my intro, and I was thinking of my intro.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry. You do your
Thank
intro.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mo Denis, running for University Regent District 5, and I've been here many times in the past. I served in the legislature for 18 years, 6 years in the Assembly, 12 years in the Senate, served as past Senate Majority Leader as well as Senate President Pro Tem, and I chaired education and finance while I served. Can't remember if that's just all the intro that you needed, or why I'm running, or is that later? Sure. So I thought I was, when I termed out of the Senate, I thought I was done running for office. I've got 8 grandkids, and my kids are all grown, and got plenty to do. But I saw that there was a need with the university system that I actually oversaw. I actually approved their budgets as part of the legislature for 18 years, and I saw that the focus wasn't on students. And for me, I think that's what, the reason I'm running is I want to put the focus back on students, accessibility, affordability, and student success. So not just getting them there, but being able to help them graduate and get the skills that they need that will help our state economically, and it will help them, be good citizens as they grow up. And so that's why I'm running. I think that my legislative experience, my leadership, I've also chaired several community boards, including the Nevada Parent Teacher Association, past president, the Las Vegas Clark County Library District Chair, and community development block grants with the city of Las Vegas. I think that I can step up quickly and be able to help make a difference.
Sue Christensen, Veterans in Politics International. Do you support expanding armed personnel beyond sworn campus police? And what specific policies would you implement to improve campus safety?
Yeah, so I think campus safety is very important, especially with the issues that we've had here just, recently. I hadn't really thought about whether we should expand that more. I think that that's something that should be looked at. I think when we talk about safety, we really need to see what are the real issues, and then talk to the people that really know what those are. I'm always one that always had an open door policy, so I want to hear from folks on both sides of an issue because before I make a decision, because I want to make sure that we're making the right decision. When it comes to not only safety of our students, but also the safety of our staff and faculty. So I would be supportive of definitely looking at what we can do there. And then once we know what that is, moving forward and being able to get that done.
Excuse me. This isn't on. May I ask a follow-up real quick?
Yeah.
Were you in the legislature when Michelle Fiore brought the campus carry bill?
I-
In 2014 or 15, I think it was. Can't remember.
If
I'm
it was
looking
in
at
14
your.
or 15, yes, I would have. If it would have been 14 or 15. 'cause I
Yes,
served
and I
until
was just
21.
wondering how you voted on that, if you remember.
And I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't even remember if it got if it actually
can't
got
remember
a vote,
myself.
if it actually got a vote. So I would have been in the Senate at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and don't know if it got a vote or not. So I can't
Okay.
say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Rayanne, Nevada Veterans Association. You have decades of legislative and Democratic Party experience, but Regent is a nonpartisan oversight role. How will you separate partisan relationships from Regent decision making? Given your legislative record on education and finance, what position or vote would you defend today?
Yeah. So that's one of the other reasons that I decided to run is the fact that it is a nonpartisan. When it comes to our students, I think that we need to get the politics out of the way and really get back to student access, student success, student affordability, and I don't know that I always had an open door, and I always reached across the aisle. Even when I was majority leader, I always wanted to hear from both sides, and I would continue to do that. Except that in this setting, it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's going to be about different things, right? Whether it's the faculty, whether it's the students, whether it's the community, the presidents of the. So I would still continue to do what I've done in that respect, and make sure I get to talk to everybody I can on the issue, and I would continue to do that. I don't think that I think that's part of the problem that they've had is I think politics is starting to creep in, and even though it's really a nonpartisan position. Yeah.
I'm of the belief that politics can't be taken out of anything, actually, especially out of my own house. But since you were in the my name is Rich Santamaro with the Nevada Veterans Association. I want you to consider the Raiders, the A's, the new Thacker Pass mining thing that's coming up, and the studio bill that just barely got defeated. And from a higher education perspective, when you have these businesses that are coming in, what would you be looking for not as a legislature, but as a Board of Regents person, as to how these businesses would be supporting higher education in Nevada?
Yeah. So as far as, I'm very familiar. I wasn't there when the A's was voted on. I was there when the Raiders was, as well as I brought the original film bill that would bring studios here. It didn't get very far that first time because people didn't know what it was really all about. But you got to start it sometimes. When it comes to like the film bill, they had a whole component that really would engage higher ed. So whether it's UNLV, CSN, or any of the other institutions in Nevada, that would give those kids an opportunity to actually really get in there and work with people that are actually in the industry. And they were willing to do that. I think in the iteration that just came out, obviously they had a piece in there for that as well. And I remember talking to the university system and to CSN. CSN has a great program for film. When it comes to the Raiders, they are also willing. They were also willing to show students that the business side of sports. I think that's important. But I've also seen that not only has the Raiders or the stadium brought a lot of economic, which is important because we have to be able to fund schools, whether it's the K-12 or whether it's higher ed. Those are all coming from the state budget, and so it's important that the organization that's doing that is willing to do that. A lot of times people come to us and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And then they get in there and they somehow forget that they were going to do that. But the Raiders so far, from what I've seen, is they've been willing to work with the community and provide, whether it's funding for organizations that are trying to help in education or other things in the community. So I think that those are important. And I think the Board of Regents can really have that communication with them. I know the president of the Raiders, she used to do some things in the community years ago when I was doing things in the community. And so I know that they're willing to talk. And I think that's something that the Board of Regents can reach out, not only to them, to the A's as well. I've spoken to the community people from A's as well. And, they're all willing to do some things. So we've got to be able to come up with some specifics, but they're willing at least to talk to us about it and how we can tie that into the university system.
Thank you.
Hello, John Frank, Veteran Politics. What are your short and long-term plans for more direct about campus security and within the teachers and the students?
Yeah. So one of the things I need to I know that the interim education committee is doing some things on safety, and I know yesterday they just had a presentation on school safety, which included higher ed, I believe, and so I'm monitoring that. And this position is because the Board of Regents currently exists as a board of 13. And in 2 years, it's going to go from 13 to 9. So there's several of these positions are only for 2 years because they're going to redraw the maps in 2 years. I feel like with my experience that I can really get some things done in 2 years. Sometimes it takes a little longer to get things done. I realized that the legislature, I thought I was going to go in and, change the world in one session and then I'd be done and go on with life. But, 18 years later, it took me, I was able to change the K-12 funding formula, but that took almost the whole 18 years and especially the last 10 years to really focus on that. But I think that, they've already started on some safety things, and that's something that I would be looking at to see what additional things they're working on. And part of that has to do with funding. So we have to figure out how we're going to, one of the things that I really want to look at is the budget, because the state funds part of it, but they're also able to raise some money as well. But, we really need to take a deep dive into the budget to see what's going on so that we can work with the different institutions to see what that we can do for safety in that respect. But I'm that's one of the things I'm willing to go and get in there and really take a look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Denis. Cindy Lake, Veterans in Politics International. How are you going to ensure the university is investing in necessary technology and infrastructure to support modern education while containing AI?
Good question. Thank you very much. So the issue of technology and in education, I just happen to have expertise in both. I spent 27 years in the computer industry, working as a troubleshooter, doing networks and software, and even worked at a software development company as part of that. And then my education background. So technology is always been a big thing for me. One of the things that I worked on when I was in the legislature was competency-based education, which allows students to move at their own pace, which right now we're just used to everybody learning at the same pace. And in order to do that, you have to use technology. I was one of the first members. I was a parent representative at the time before I was in the legislature of the Commission on Educational Technology for Nevada, mostly dealt with K-12. But now I professionally I do government affairs. I do some lobby work with some different educational organizations, and one of the ones that we do does AI. And the AI that they're using is a closed system that becomes what we call a chatbot, which is kind of a teacher's assistant. They do school gardens, and so they use this chatbot to help kids to answer questions so that the teacher can focus on the class. And then if kids have, like my lettuce is wilting, what do I need to do? This chatbot can actually talk to them. And so, there's AI is not going to go away. So we've got to make sure that what is there can protect students. And at the same time, at the university level, obviously kids are using AI instead of sometimes doing the actual work. So there needs to be ways to look at that. And I know there's a lot of folks that are working on that. And I also know there's some organizations that actually specifically are working on the safety issue that they could come in and actually, like we certify things like, for example, energy efficiency. They have a it's not a rating, it's an actual certificate that you can get that says, hey, we're an organization that saves energy or whatever. They want to do a similar thing. This organization out of Massachusetts, out of Boston, Massachusetts. It's a nonprofit. But so these types of things are popping up that are going to allow us to then say, hey, we're doing the things that are going to protect our kids. So, and I support those kinds of things as well. So.
Quick follow-up. I'm sorry. I drew a blank. I had a follow-up question. Go ahead, Sue. Thank you.
It'll come back, I'm sure.
Sue Christensen, Veterans in Politics International. Do you think that higher education in Nevada is currently too political?
So let me clarify. When you say higher education, are you talking about the board and the governance part, or are you talking about just the education part?
The education with the board and with the professors.
Okay, so earlier you made the comment, Rick made the comment that everything has politics, right? It doesn't matter what it is, your job, even a family has politics for that matter, right? So I do feel that, even the university system is political. You have issues between, faculty and administrators and students and the administration. And so, there are those issues. You do have to take that into account, but you have to also define what political is, whether it's, if you're talking about politics, that we see going on and all of divisiveness and all of that. I think that's starting to creep into that. But, if you're talking about politics as in how things get done, then then definitely that happens. And you have to have the relationships to be able to actually come to conclusions and to find and have success in actually coming up with programs and policies that are going to work for, helping our students.
Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. How would you vote differently than your incumbent on tuition, DEI, Title IX, cybersecurity, and veteran services?
Okay, you're going to have to probably remind me because I don't have anything to write those down. So the first one was tuition. So on tuition, I know, having seen their budgets in the past, I know that it's difficult and that there was a need to raise tuition. But I think before we do that, I would have looked at the budget. So I don't know how I would have voted because if I was in then, if I was to vote on that now, I would definitely be looking at, so why are we raising tuition and look at the budget. One of the, I know that the new budget guy actually for the university system actually came over recently from the legislature, Brody Leiser. And I know I'm going to have a lot of discussions with him about the budget, trying to see, what's going on with that. So I'm not sure. I don't know all the thought process that went into the incumbent doing, I believe that he voted against it. And I tend to agree that, we don't want to raise things for students because that's part of the affordability thing, right? But one of the things that I did in the legislature is I passed the Promise Scholarship, which allows students to go to community college for free if they are willing to do community service, if they are willing to meet with a mentor, and if they're willing to fill out the FAFSA. So if they fill out the FAFSA, most of them actually are going to find out that they already have enough money to go to college. But so what's that kind of was a way to trick students into filling out the FAFSA so that they could have money to go to school, because a lot of them didn't realize that they could go to school. So anyway, so those, when it comes to tuition, I would definitely be looking at that and looking at, what can we do? But at the same time, costs do go up, and our tuition actually compared to many of the other tuitions across the country is actually fairly reasonable. But at the same time, if this is what you're doing now and you change it to this, people can't just do it quickly, right? So anyway, so that's that one. And the DEI, I think, was the second one.
Yeah, DEI and Title IX.
Okay, so DEI, on those issues, I have supported issues that help students. So if there's barrier, I want to remove those barriers. And so, whether you label, we want to put labels on a lot of things now, but for me, it's all about the student. And so how can we remove barriers? I am Latino. My parents immigrated here. I understand issues sometimes when you got left out, even though I was just as qualified as somebody else. And so I want to make sure that those barriers are not there. So I would definitely look at whatever is being proposed. And if it removes barriers, I'm gonna support that. When it comes to the Title IX, the Title IX, as far as making sports accessible equally to men and women, right? I obviously support that. I think women should be given the same opportunities to play sports as men, and in the past that wasn't always true. And they've changed a lot now. It's when it comes to that. What was the next?
And do you, how do you support men in women's sports?
Yeah. So when it comes to that issue, I don't know everything on that issue, but what I do know is that though you can find solutions. If there are barriers there, or if there are issues, we need to do that. I don't think spending public board time talking about those kinds of issues is what the priority should be. The priority should be, first of all, what are we doing to provide access for students? What are we doing to make it affordable, and how are we helping them to graduate, right? When it comes to these other issues, I think they're important, and I think we need to have those discussions. And I think we can come to conclusions if we work together by hearing both sides of the issue and coming up with an answer. And since I haven't had to do that, that's something I would definitely need to do some more study on and figure out, what are we going to do to help students.
And by provide access, what does that?
So access, I'm talking about access to college, to actually get into college. I think that needs to be the priority, that we need to help our kids get access to university system or community college, or to other technical type education for that matter.
Okay. And then on cybersecurity and veteran services?
So on cybersecurity, what's the specific question there?
It was how you would vote different than your incumbent.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how he voted on cybersecurity. I know he has a tech background as well. I know that when it comes to cybersecurity, we obviously need to make sure that things are secure, right? We know that they broke into the state system, right? And so I know there's a lot of work going on when it comes to cybersecurity. Having worked in technology with networks, I know the data that's out there, and we need to protect that data. We need to figure out what it is we need to do. When I served in the legislature, there was very few of us that were tech people. And so every time they made proposals on technology, a lot of my colleagues didn't understand it. And they just saw the dollar signs and say, why do we have to do all this? Or they might just say, or they might just approve it and not ask questions. But I always ask questions because I wanted to know, so why are you doing this specific thing when you could do it this way instead, right? So I think that when it comes to those kind of issues, I'm definitely going to be asking a lot of questions. And the last one was the cyber
and veteran services.
Veteran services. So the veteran services, we had bills that would come before us that would provide classes, provide tuition for veterans, and also I think I've always voted in support of all of those issues that came before us, and I know that we need to continue. That comes down to the accessibility and the affordability issues. So making sure that veterans have any barrier that's in the way for veterans to be able to get into college and to be successful, I want to make sure that we remove those barriers.
Santa Maura with Nevada Veterans Association. If we continue to produce graduates for jobs that are shrinking due to AI, we're setting them up for failure. What degree programs would you reconsider or scale back? And what workforce programs would you prioritize instead of those?
So I don't know what specifically. I mean, right now, if I were to say what would we cut back, because AI is getting into everything now. I mean, you've got AI, you got farmers using AI. What I would say when it comes to that is that we need to make sure that we're providing the soft skills, first of all, that workers need. Because when it comes to technology, the technology companies are going to train their folks. So if you give a programmer the basics on how to program, the company that they go to work for is going to specifically give them training on what they do. So we want to make sure that those programs are in place. We also need to make sure that we're, when I went to school, I actually studied music, but I got into technology because I knew I didn't want to do music, and computers were just coming out, but it was moving so fast that even anything that I would have studied as a freshman would have been obsolete by the time I was a senior. And so we've got to continue today to provide the basic skills on how to think and how to write and how to work and show up to work and those kinds of things. That needs to be a priority, because whatever you teach them as far as theory is going to be changing because of AI. And there's opportunities because of AI to, it will eliminate some things that need to be done, but there's going to be other things that people have to do. AI doesn't just automatically do everything by itself. Somebody has to program it. Somebody has to, secure it and those kinds of things. So making sure that we've got those particular types of jobs available and that training available in our university and college system.
Thanks.
I'm going to pass.
Okay, I'm back. Cindy Lake, Veterans in Politics. My follow-up from before was, would you advocate for one system, one AI chatbot, for instance, that you mentioned, or one AI program for the entire higher education system, or would you advocate for different, unique to the school type of AI programs, if you will, because I don't know enough to.
Right. Yeah. So
Thank you.
So when you think of AI, you think of it as a tool. And depending on, and there's different ways to use it. I mean, there's some AI that could go out to the internet and do everything, right? And then there's other AI where you give it the information and it goes and does what it needs to do. But that said, there are different things that you need to do. So there isn't one like big AI that does everything. And so you've got to have the right tools for them. So you would definitely want to make sure that they're getting that the different parts of the university system are getting the tools that they need. So, if you're talking about administrative, what kind of do they need? What do the professors need? And if they're teaching like science, or if they're teaching engineering, there's probably going to be some specific things that they're going to need. So you got to definitely look at that. And, I think that as far as the regents, they're going to be talking about the overall policy and not the specifics of each tool. But, here's the guidelines that you need to follow when you're using an AI tool, for example.
Quick follow-up. As far as expenditure on that goes, that's where I was going with that is, would we be looking for more money to implement these tools, or would we be looking at cutting redundant, unnecessary programs? And then also, what's your one big goal for your 2 small years? Thank you.
So as far as that, okay, now you got me thinking about the second part. Now I got to get back to the first part. Sorry, say that again. Just the first part. Oh, okay. Yeah, the cost. The cost. Okay, so yeah, so technology. Used to be people would say, okay. When I first got on the technology commission, it was like we had $60 million, and the goal was that every kid would get a computer. But what we realized was that actually we had schools that only had one plug-in the whole classroom. And so they didn't even have the ability to plug in a computer because they would have to unplug their overhead projector, or they'd have to unplug the pencil sharpener. But what we realized was that a third of the money for technology goes to buy the equipment, a third of it goes to support it, and a third of it goes to keeping it updated, right? So, but at the same time, technology was supposed to make things easy, so we wouldn't have to work 40 hours a week, and all that. But we see that that's not true. However, there are savings when it comes to, like, for example, using AI to take care of some things. There's some savings there, but on the back end, you still have to support it. I think there's ways to save some money there, but there still needs to be a commitment to spend what you need as far as for the AI or for the securing of the AI, right? The other part of that was cost. It goes into training so that people know how to use it, because if they can have a computer and it could be up and running, but if we didn't show them how to use it, they never use it. And so definitely would be looking at how do we. Where are there savings, and if not, then we got to figure out how to pay for that, and obviously you have to either make cuts or you have to come up with more revenue, and there are some ways to do that, and but we have to try to figure that out, and that's changing all the time.
Sue Christensen, Veterans in Politics International. My brother years ago had a full ride scholarship to college. He realized after his second year in football that he was not going to go on to be pro, and that he probably needed to focus more on his education, and went on to be a successful civil engineer for Kiewit for many, many years. Did very well. My parents had divorced, so he had to figure out how he was going to pay to make up what the scholarship was going to cover. And then you keep talking about lowering barriers. Don't you think by lowering barriers in the higher education, risk-producing students are less prepared to handle complex real-world problem solving, because we're taking away anything that makes them have any skin in the game by making things so easy? Sometimes when it's harder to get, makes the prize a little sweeter. Is lowering the barriers all the time to make it easier a benefit, or are we hurting these students?
So when I say barriers, I'm not talking about making it easier for them as a student. What I'm talking about is barriers that for example, it used to be you could take an English class at CSN, and then you try to transfer to UNR, and UNR would say, well, you're going to have to retake that class because we didn't teach it to you. That's a barrier, right? There's no reason that if they're covering the same material, there's no reason they should have to retake it. And sometimes I felt like, sometimes universities would do that because they make more money when they teach classes. So, but some of those have been removed. So when I talk about barriers, those are the kinds of things. If they are, we had an issue in the K-12 system for years where, you had a Latino kid that scored really high on a math test, right? But the counselor in the school wouldn't let him take the advanced math because they said, well, you're only going to be a landscaper. So why do you need why do you need to take so those kinds of the barriers that I'm talking about, that, that people just assume things. And so we want to give kids the opportunity to succeed. Now, when it comes to, what they have to do to graduate, I'm not talking about making that easier. That needs to be rigorous so that they do get the skills that they need to be successful. And, I've got 5 kids, and, my kids are real intelligent. I have one that's, I need to stop doing that because they all are very intelligent. Every time they hear this, because I have one that's highly gifted. And but, when it comes to those issues, they have to learn, on their own some of those things. And, just like we haven't provided all of their schooling for them to go to college, they need to work some of that, right? And we, I feel that that's important. So I definitely wouldn't want to lower the standards, just the things that keep them from being able to be successful. And Another barrier would be like, many of our students have to work. And so sometimes they'll take a class and then that class won't be available again now for another year and a half. And so they got to wait to graduate. And so in the meantime, they get busy with work and don't go back and finish. And, so those kinds of things I want to make sure that we eliminate.
Thank you for that clarification.
Rayanne Tobin on behalf of Nevada Veterans Association. Name one donor, party ally, union, or lobbyist group you would be willing to disappoint to protect students and taxpayers.
I mean, that would be the case with anybody. At the end of the day, I'm going to do what's right. When I was in the legislature, to do what's right for my constituents. It wasn't always necessarily popular with even my constituents because sometimes I had information that they didn't have. So it doesn't matter, when I've got somebody that donates to me, that doesn't influence how I'm going to vote. All that does is it gives me the ability to talk to them and then come and talk to me. But my door is just as open to my constituent, that parked backwards in a parking stall in his apartment complex and his car got towed. I passed a law that would keep them from being able to tow his car for 2 days because it wasn't fair. I mean, he just forgot. And they had some silly little rule that said you can't park backwards in your stall. And he was just an older guy that just got his groceries out, right? So that was just as important to me as passing, the new funding formula for education. And I would continue to do the same thing. I'm gonna give everybody an opportunity to come talk to me about why they feel whatever it is right or wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision that's best for the students and for the constituency.
Follow up with that. Do you feel that your longstanding history in the legislature and so forth, that there could be some downside to that with people that have contributed in the past that could try to sway you one way or another because of previous relationships? And if you be as a regent, could that affect decision making going forward?
So all of the the legislature and any politics is actually, it's all about relationships. And so having relationships with people is very important because today you might have something that you agree with somebody on, but tomorrow you might be sworn enemies on that issue, right? And sometimes there's groups where they're almost historically they oppose each other. But a bill comes up that all of a sudden they're best friends, right? And so it's really not about what's happened in the past. It's always about what's coming in the But having a relationship where I know whether they're telling me the truth or not, because everybody they're going to lobby you, and that's anybody is going to come and say this, right? But actually having those relationships actually helps because I know I know if I can trust what they're saying, right? And so that's why it's so important to be able to talk to everybody because you start to figure out who's telling you the truth, who's not, and how they do that, right? Because sometimes they just change their the way that they feel about something based on their clients or whatever it is, right? And I currently work as a government affairs person, and I do some lobby work as well. And most of my clients are nonprofits, or smaller businesses, and I feel like sometimes they're the ones that get left behind because you got the big companies that can put a lot of money into things, and the other ones should have just as much ability. So I think that my experience in the past actually is helpful because when you get in there new, you don't have those relationships, and you've got to try to create those. And if you don't have those relationships, you don't always get all the information that you need to be able to make a decision.
Nevada Veterans Association. The price of any good or service is dependent on the supply of it and the demand for it, right? So when we say free education for higher education, does the current funding formula that you've talked about, does that actually support free education? And if not, what would you do to change that formula so it would?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Promise Scholarship earlier. Promise allows kids to go for free to community college. But what they have to do is, and the reason I did that, I have water, I think, somewhere down here, so thank you. The reason I created that was because there are some kids that are very smart, but maybe they just didn't get good grades. And so they get left out of scholarships because of that. There are kids that think that just because of their grades, they can't go to college. And yet, if they filled out the FAFSA, they would find out that actually they can get grants to pay for everything. And, the Promise Scholarship is the last dollar scholarship. So they have to, anything else that they get comes first. And then if there's a gap, it fills that gap. So when it comes to money, the state puts in whatever it is, 10 million to help whatever. We had, it was like 10,000 students applied for it, the first one. And I think 1,200 get it because a lot of them realize they don't need it. But it's also an investment when we do that because we're giving skills for the jobs that we need to kids. And so I don't think that you've got to make decisions when it comes to budgets on how you want to spend money. And having the Promise Scholarship, because of the FAFSA issue, actually brings more money into the system because kids weren't signing up for FAFSA, so they weren't going to college. And so we were leaving dollars on the table that were available to students in Nevada, but that we weren't getting because they weren't filling out all the paperwork that you needed to say, that you wanted to do that. And so in that respect, that brought in more dollars in that respect.
So quick follow-up question to that is, so you believe that there's programs in place now to help those students, but you don't necessarily believe, like somebody else who stated earlier, that we should just print more money in order to get people through the college. I mean, that's not something you support, or?
Well, you don't need to print money. Do we? I mean, we live in a state that's, one of the lowest tax states in the country, and yet we were able to do some amazing things. I think that, obviously if we had more revenue, we could do some even more amazing things. But you should always look first to find the efficiencies in what you need to do. You need to look at what's the return on that, right? I mean, the fact that we got more kids going to college because of a Promise Scholarship or the Millennium Scholarship, any of those things that provide opportunities, in the end, brings economic prosperity to our state because kids that are educated are going to get higher paying jobs. They're going to, we're hoping by training them here that they're going to stay here because a lot of times because we don't have programs, they go somewhere else and they never come back. And so, I think we should always look for ways to save money. We should look for ways to move it around too. Maybe we're spending too much here and we need to spend it over here. That's all part of the budget process. But at the same time, if there's ways that we can figure out as well to increase revenue so that we can do even more, we should look at that. We still haven't found a solution in that respect. But, one of the things that I did with the funding formula for K-12 was that there was money that's going at the end of the 2 years. If they couldn't spend it because we limited them to spending it a certain way, that money went back into the general fund. With the new funding formula for K-12, we now put that money back in, and it stays in education. It has a separate education rainy day fund, separate funding, and over 10 years, that's actually $1 billion. We didn't have to raise taxes to come up with that $1 billion, but we had to take it from here where it was going to the general fund and keep it with education, which is where it was meant to be anyways. So those kinds of things, I definitely am always looking for those to see what we can do. When it comes to the university system, obviously they don't get to weigh in on any new taxes or say the savings that the state does, but they can do their own internal things as far as what they can do to be more efficient and do that.
John Frank, Veteran Politics. One of my best things, one of my favorite things is about the Regent is you get to retain your responsibility and strategic oversight and can act directly in response to most any crisis, whether it major safety crises, some of the shortcomings. And the issues now today, we have educators that are just not giving the students what they deserve. And in fact, when the students are not agreeing with the educators or not letting the students pass on, would you be interested in creating a mandatory sentencing guideline for any educator that defunks a child?
So I'm not quite understanding the question. When you say,
So you get the opportunity to deal with major crisis. So let's say if you have an educator that decides that, well, I don't like what you wrote on your essay, I'm going to go ahead and give you an F just because that educator did not like that essay. Do you think that educator should have reached stiff penalties?
so having a son that went through high school and never scored less than a 95 on any final exam, scored 105 on his physics exam, and the teacher failed him. I had to go talk to the principal and say, you don't want him to retake that class, right? Because he obviously knows, he scored 105. He got everything right plus the extra credit. So having policies in place that allow a student to be able to say, hey, that doesn't seem fair to me. I think I support those kinds of policies. Obviously, because a student could say, hey, that isn't fair. The professor's saying it actually did something that was fair. So you have to have a process in place. So I do support policies that will help, that give people an opportunity. Because like in my case, I needed to be able to, if my son had retaken that physics, I guarantee you he would have failed it, because he never did homework. That's why he always got low grades, because he wouldn't turn his homework in. He'd score, 90 whatever on his final, but he wouldn't turn homework in. But students, some students do everything, and then because of professor or whatever, there needs to be policies in place. And I think there are some of those in place now. But if they're not, then students and faculty, for that matter, need to have a process that they can go to. And if they don't currently have that, they need to have that in place. And I know some of those are individual by institution. So like UNLV might have some things different. But the university system needs to provide some guidelines for that for them.
Thank you, Mr. Denis. We're going to conclude the interview portion. We want to recognize and thank all of our sponsors, but we're going to give you a few minutes to give us your closing statement, and please include what your big goal is for your 2 years. Thank you.
All right. So I'll start with the goal first. So my goal, I already mentioned, student access to the system, affordability, and student success. Those are the three things that will guide what I would like to do. I think my experience, whether it's legislature, whether it's my previous experience in the community, I still do things in the community now. I work with Boy Scouts, and I'm on a board, one of the hospital boards, because I think it's important to have those things in our communities. I think that experience, my experience with budgets, my experiences with policies, with even laws, and my experience in education, whether it's before the legislature, during the legislature, or even some of the things that I do now to keep up with what's going on in education. I think that will help me to be able to actually get in there and actually get something done right away. Even though I know that there are always going to be things that come up. You have the best intentions, and then all of a sudden you have a crisis, and you have to deal with the crisis. But I think that with the amount of time, the short time, at least with the 2 years, that I think that there's a lot of things that can be done there. I think there's opportunities. One person can't change everything, right? Because you've got 13 people that are making a decision, and that's going to change to 9 in the future. But still, you've got to be able to bring people together. I think I've shown that I can do that, to try to bring leadership to, use leadership to bring people together to make good decisions when it comes to the things that need to happen for our kids. And I also appreciate what you guys do, because there isn't anybody that knows everything, right? I mean, there's people will tell you when they run for office, I'm going to do this. A lot of them say, I'm going to make education better. But most of them don't even know what that means. But I've always relied on the experience of others to make sure that I'm informed as to the issues, and then come up with whether it's and I didn't limit that to just Nevada. I mean, I participated in some national committees, chaired some national committees on different things, because I want to make sure that if there's successful things going on out there or failures, that we don't do those here, and that with successful things we do. And I think that I can do that. I didn't, like I said, I wasn't really looking to run again, but I don't want to keep complaining about this without doing something about it. And that's something that I've always done, is to step up when I'm needed to step up.
Well, thank you again. And we would once again recognize and thank all of our sponsors, Judge Mary Perry, Clark County District Court, Family Division, Department P, Christine Brewer, Clark County District Court, Family Division, Department S, Veterans in Politics International, Nevada Veterans Association, and our additional sponsoring partners for their leadership, support, and dedication to veterans and to the integrity of our non-judicial process. Thank you for your professionalism, sir, respect, and participation. Thank you. Good luck.
Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.